First of all, I want to once again thank Pitney Bowes for allowing me to be part of the menu, or the, the agenda menu. Food was good, though. I love talking about this stuff. I've got like the greatest job in the world, being the president of an association that represents the industry. I get to talk about the customer experience, and I kind of wonder why everybody gets so excited about it, because it's really, really old. Has gone back since the beginning of time, when Eve said to Adam, "How was the apple?" That was part of that whole customer experience thing, and it's evolved over time. And then we have now omni-channel, and as Jerry put it, multi-channel, and we forgot cross-channel, and we have all of these different elements that go into this customer experience. And people go, why is that important? Customer experience has been around forever, but it has evolved. It will continue to evolve. And the reality of it is if you don't have some type of CCM strategy, you need one, or your competitors are going to pass you up. And the other thing is, don't ever expect to finish. You can't just start a CCM strategy and say, okay, 18 months from now, I think we're going to be good to go, because the world's going to change. There's going to be things that change. Technology's going to change. Human behavior's going to change. All of that's going to change in 18 months. I got to share with you one of my best customer experiences with Chick-fil-A. How many people like Chick-fil-A? Okay. How many people have the Chick-fil-A app? Nobody? Here we go. You know what's going on. It's the best app in the world. You download this thing, you put in your credit card information, you're driving down the street and you go, I think I'm going to have a Chick-fil-A. So you cautiously pull over. Not one of those people behind the wheel. You pull over, you place your order, you hit enter, and you drive to the Chick-fil-A. And when you get in the pickup area, you hit I'm here, and they walk out with your order and hand you your order, and you take off. Now, isn't that cool? Who would have anticipated curbside pickup for fast food? Exactly. And it doesn't cost anymore. The only thing, if you download the app, I got to warn you. I was driving up I-75. I've got my wife and a couple of my kids in the car, and I hand my wife my phone, and I said, well, order some Chick-fil-A and we can pick it up on the way home, because it's only a couple miles from the house. Now, let me tell you what the app does do. It selects the Chick-fil-A that you're nearest to, which might not be the one that you want to pick up at. So before you click, make sure. But I will tell you, here's part of that customer experience. I went into the wrong Chick-fil-A. Okay. I was a bit of a jerk, I will tell you, because I ordered it and I said, here's my receipt and everything else. And, I want my sandwich. I wasn't real bad, because I'm not really I don't freak out too much. But, I went in there, and the manager at the place says, well, I'm sorry, sir, but that's for the Chick-fil-A on Bruce B. Downs, not on State Road 54. And I went, oh man, I was driving by there about the time we ordered. He goes, that's how it works. He said, but here's your order. That's a good customer experience. So what I'd like to share with you today is I have the opportunity to meet with not only vendors but end users and talk about a variety of things, including CCM. So what I'd like to share with you today is kind of some of the things that I've derived over the years in talking with business users. The reality of it is, and this is not rocket science, all companies want to better communicate with their customer. Why would you not want to do that? Most companies acknowledge customer communications as a priority. When you talk to people and you're talking to them, how you communicate, why you communicate, what the message is, and everything else, all of them say it's a priority. Some have a documented communication strategy, but most don't. I'm sure you can confirm that, and other people in the room. A lot of people don't. They think they're doing CCM. There's these silos within the company that believe they're doing CCM, but there's really, in many companies, not a documented CCM strategy. And the definition of what customer communications varies from this company to this company and every company in between. So, what do business users, why would you do this? Why would you spend the money? Why would you allocate the resources? Well, you want brand loyalty. You want people to like you. Apple spends a lot of money to get people to like them, and then they spend some money and you're not happy about it, especially when they change the little, things that plug. Oh, that pissed me off. So, greater customer retention. There's all the stats about losing a customer costs you, getting a customer back costs you 5 or 6 times as much money as getting a new customer and that type of thing. And that stuff's true. Companies are now looking at lifetime revenue. You've been with me for 20 years. We've done all this. We've sold you all these products. We've upgraded you and everything else. That represents lifetime revenue, which ties right into brand loyalty and customer retention. It's important. New customer acquisition. Everybody wants new customers. I have not ever met somebody that says, I got more business than I need. I really don't want any more customers. And everybody wants to lower costs and increase revenue, but you got to be careful. You can only take cost out till it equals 0. Once you get to 0, there's nothing else that you got to work with. And you got to be careful when you squeeze cost out of some of these strategies, because you're going to pay in the end. Okay, so what are some of the obstacles? Now, once again, this is not rocket science. I'm just trying to give you a kind of a perspective of when I talk to people. Lack of resources. Nobody's got resources. I remember the old days when there was an analyst for every salesman at Xerox. Remember those days? Where you had all of these people just sitting around. I remember having, an administrative assistant when I worked for Cytex that made my plane reservations and did all that. Well, guess who does all that now? We don't have the same resources that we once had. The politics, the internal politics, everything's like this. This is my stuff. Don't touch, my production facility. Don't touch my IT department. There's all kinds of silos and politics internally, and you're never going to develop an effective CCM strategy with internal politics and silos. Ownership. Everybody gets into the room, and I call it shared blame almost. You get 20 people in the room, somebody comes up with an idea, and then somebody says, well, who wants to head this up? Nobody. Somebody's got to take ownership. And then there's got to be a starting point. Doesn't matter where you are in your CCM journey, whether you're at 0 or what you think might be 90%, which may be really 70% because it changed since you started that whole process. Somebody's got to establish a starting point, but never a finishing point. I meet with vendors all the time, obviously. They're a big part of Xplor. They're big supporters. The Pitney Bowes and the Ricos and Canons and all of those people. And the beauty about, and Solomar, I'm sorry, and ISIS. Anyway, the beauty about the vendor community these days is they're more consultants today than they used to be. I remember when I worked for Xerox and other companies, the motto was never confuse sales with installation. Sales guy would go out and sell it, and the technical people would have to install it. Whether it did what they said they did or not, that was their job. That's changed a lot today. And I think that's good for anybody that's looking at technology. CCM vendors obviously want to sell CCM solutions. But what I see today in dealing with vendors and end users is it's not crammed down their throats. They know if they provide enough expertise, they provide solutions that are scalable, and you might start down here and they wish you kind of would have started a little higher, but if you're committed to a CCM strategy that you're going to grow and they're going to be there to support you. And, eventually, your initial investment's going to end up being up here, but then you're going to have a really tight CCM strategy, and they're going to benefit from that. So they are consultants these days. Their approach is selling and presenting varies. There are some vendors out there that it's a box sell, or what they used to call a box sell, but it's not so much. Not in the Explorer community, I will tell you that. So we don't allow those people. But, that's the thing that you have to, when you're picking out a vendor, some of the things you have to look at. Some of the obstacles are the commitment of the management within the company. Once again, the internal politics. You got to find a champion. When I was selling hardware and software, the only way you were going to be successful is you had to find a champion inside of a company. You had to, in fact, give them the tools to look like a hero, the ROI, the documentation, all of that, so they could go to their management, the people that committed, and say, this is a good thing. This is why we need to do this. And you need to look at real ROI, not that foo-foo stuff. Somebody was talking about, what was Paul? I was talking about the measurements, still working on the measurements and stuff. Don't do foo-foo measurements. Everybody thinks, well, we do this and this. If it's not a real metric, if it's not a real ROI to that organization, then don't do it. You've got to have a real ROI. And then there's going to be starts and stops. You might get the commitment, you might do research, you might move down the block and everything else, that something's going to happen. The champion, is going to hit the lotto and retire. Huh?
Get promoted.
Yeah. One year we had a guy from a group from Chubb Insurance. We're flying down to Xplor. They landed, and they found out this is honest God truth. They found out they won the lottery. They bought first class tickets, didn't come to the conference. I was really upset about that, and flew back. So anyway, there's going to be starts and stops. This is one of my favorite from Jerry Maguire, where he's jumping up in the office. So when we look at this and what are the challenges, what's driving CCM? It's important in order to build a CCM strategy that you understand what's driving CCM. And what is CCM? I mentioned that it's different to different people. At the end of this presentation, we're going to describe CCM in 15 words, some of which you probably heard already. Okay, so here's some of the challenges. Information overload. How many people have Twitter accounts? Not tweet, but Twitter. Facebook. One or more Facebooks. Okay, LinkedIn. There we go. Okay, FaceTime. You only have that if you have young kids. All of those things. We're in information overload. I put this up here because as I was doing some research for this presentation, it's also information overload, also known as infobesity or infoxication. Okay, so that's the education portion of my presentation today. So we go back to this, and I did research on this too. You see that whole, we get over 3,000 messages, media messages a day, 5,000, and depending on how you look at it. Well, I didn't change this number after I did the research, but I want to explain to you, because I never thought I don't get 3,000 messages a day. I total up my emails, which I get a lot of emails. I have more than one email account, Facebook, all that stuff. But 3,000, come on. What they're talking about, by the way, is if you're shaving in the morning and your shaving can's sitting there and it says Edge on the side, that's a marketing message. So anyway, take this with a grain of salt, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The numbers, percentage-wise probably make the same. But out of all the messaging that we get a day, you're going to pay attention to 52. You're going to remember 4. If you're a male over 65, you're going to remember 1. But That was the greatest thing when I turned 65. I told my wife I was a male I didn't have to remember before. Now I don't have to remember. So anyway, you're at 0.0013. No matter what you call it, no matter what the numbers are, that's pretty paltry if you think about it. Now, I didn't put all of this up here because I started looking for a graphic with all of the social media channels on here. And I mean, I would have been, 10 slides. But what I'm talking about is this customer experience that has evolved. If you look back in 1980, we had the phone, mail, the fax machine, FedEx. The what?
That's a pager.
Oh, yeah, that's a pager. Yeah. How old are you? There's a pager. That's the days when you were a road warrior. You had the pager on. Somebody calls you. You pulled over the side of the road. You went to a payphone and you called somebody back.
Go find a payphone.
Yeah, find a pager. So, and then we had the mobile phone. Now, interesting story. When I was talking about customer experience, when I got out of high school and I went to work for a graphite company, and what I would do is, people would call up, we'd send them a catalog, they call up, they order this graphite, we'd write the order down, we'd turn it over to the warehouse, they'd pull it, pack it, ship it. Now, one thing that was unique was the guy that I worked for had this whole customer experience down, CCM down, this is back in 1972. Now, what he made me do, and the other guy that took orders, is when you're on the phone and that person says, it's my birthday, you write it down. When that person says it's my anniversary or I have a new granddaughter, and that's that whole conversational thing that we were talking about, talking to your customers and extrapolating information on them and connecting to them on a one-to-one basis. We had this whole list. So when they called back, you pulled out the file, you put it down, you look over to the left, and you brought that into your conversation. My son, just started high school. Well, how's he doing in school? How's he adapting to high school? So you have this conversation going with people. And then it drives the customer loyalty, the retention, and everything else. The problem is, then fax machines came around. Then they started faxing their orders in. Then what do? You're not talking to them. You're faxing the order. That was the downfall of this whole thing. You start faxing the orders in, you give it to the shipping people, it sends out, then you get the other order. Well, all this stuff, and then these kids get older, and you can't talk to them how the kids in high school because you just graduated from college, So that whole one-to-one touch point went away as technology started to evolve. So we had this stuff, now we have all this stuff, and it's become more complicated, which is why CCM is important. Just a little bit of trivia for everybody. That was called the brick. Did anybody own a brick? You're too young to own a brick. It must have been used. So anyway, $4,000 in 1984. $4,000 to carry a brick. I had one with the case, You walk down the street like this, looking good with the case, but you had to make sure that the antenna was in it. So it took 10 hours to charge. Who would put up with that now? If your phone's not charged in 30 minutes, you're ticked. And then you could talk for a whole 30 minutes, which in some way was probably a good thing based on some of the people I talked to. But anyway, just a little bit of... So as I look at CCM, there's 4 factors that are driving CCM. Technology, human behavior, compliance, and relevance. Those are the 4 things, in my opinion, that are driving CCM. And in that whole relevance thing, we have what you want to say and what they're interested in. There's that whole little overlap of relevance. All of us get stuff in our email, on Facebook, on all this stuff. 80% of it's irrelevant. 80% ticks it off. And what do? You opt out, you delete, you do all that type of thing.
Can you go back for that for 1 second, though?
Sure.
It's interesting that at least 3 of the 4 are non-consumer focused. So if we're talking about customer communications, technology, compliance, and relevance
Yeah.
is not necessarily customer focused.
Relevance would be. Compliance has nothing.
It's customer intended, not necessarily customer focused.
Customer intended, exactly, but not
So
customer.
compliance is intended for the customer's best interest, but it's not always customer
Yeah.
focused. I agree with you.
It's oftentimes not customer focused because we all send out all these documents that we know no one's going to read.
But it's a necessary part of CCM. You can't get away from it.
No, I don't disagree. It's just it's interesting. Where does the
Oh yeah, where it's
where
at?
does the customer fit in here if we're really looking from a consumer's perspective?
Well, I would say technology for sure, human behavior, and relevance. You're the one that selects what's relevant or not, the customer. If it's irrelevant, it's gone, you know. The sad thing is we've become human sorting machines, you know. It just, huh? So, if I look at some of these factors, you know, we have the web. You know, everybody's spending a lot of time on the web. We have social media. Although I will tell you, I'm spending less time on social media because this election just wore me out. We have what, you know, augmented reality, enhanced print, color, that type of thing as part of CCM. And above all, we have mobile technology. You know, when you get to the point where you drive down the block and say, oh, I forgot my cell phone, and you turn around and drive back, that's huge. I mean, how many's ever done that, honestly?
Yeah.
Okay, no, we have some honest people in the room. But you do. And the sad thing is, you don't talk on the phone. You use it for everything else but talking on it generally. And then I have this dilemma with my kids. I have 8 children, and so 5 of them have phones. I think 6 have phones, 7. I don't know. I think they all have phones. But anyway, I call my kids. They don't answer the phone. I text them. I get a response just like that. And then some of them do 10,000 text messages a month. You know, what else do you do? You know, so anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. So let's look at human behavior. What?
Thumble turble.
Yeah. I can't talk. Thank God for that voice stuff. Let's talk about human behavior. All of us are spending more time online. We're spending more time on the web. Certainly mobile. Younger people gaming. Okay, I don't do the game stuff anymore. And we all have an increased disdain for bothersome communications, things that we don't care about. I'll tell you, this whole enrollment thing for re-enrollment period for ACA. I'm on Medicare. I don't care. Stop sending me that stuff. And you opt out and you still get that stuff. So it ticks me off. I wouldn't even buy insurance from that company if I had to because they tick me off. So there's an increased disdain for irrelevant information. Now, this only goes to 2014, but it kind of shows you some trends. If you look at 2010, digital, now this includes several things here, we spent 29.6% time on digital, and now it's 47. Okay. Another interesting thing, but I'm not sure it happens in my household, is TV watching has gone down. Now, what they don't include here is multitasking, where you're watching, you got the TV on, you're really not watching it, and they're texting. So, print, the amount of time we spent on print goes down. The only reason why we get a newspaper at my house is to line the bottom of our parrot's cage. That's the honest to God truth. I get all my, I subscribe to different things. I get all of my, it's 75 cents a week, which is cheaper than those liners for the bottom of the page, you know? So I get all of my my information online, and I get it instantly. When I get the Sunday paper, which my wife does use the coupons on Sunday, but when I get the Sunday paper, it's old news. I already read it. So anyway, that's not real surprising. But
The TV, I think, one of the key things with the TV, my 12-year-old doesn't have a clue that a show comes on at a specific time on a specific day.
good point.
Because everything is DVR.
Yep.
And you fast forward through the commercials, so that 30-minute program is now really 17 minutes, so I'm spending less time on television.
Yeah.
Which is great, but then you end up filling it with something else, like multitasking, or like you said. So
Yep.
I can see where the TV would go down. It's gone down because of the enhancements that they've made to the technology that we use to watch the TV.
And it's
Live TV is like the worst thing ever.
And-
I hate
and-
live TV with a passion.
it's wonderful. You can skip the commercials that those guys are paying all that money for. You can tick that off your 3,000 messages a day. So anyway, here's another. What time am I supposed to be done? Here's another look. A little different, but kind of same kind of information. Look at the growth in mobile. Okay, desktop stays the same. Other connected device, and then TV drops. So it means we're still spending a lot of time online. So government regulations. Let me ask somebody, everybody prints in here, or knows somebody that prints, or sells to somebody that prints. Does anybody have an idea in your company from a percentage basis in producing a document what the cost of government regulations and compliance is? If you do, you would be the first, and I talk to groups a lot. Nobody knows how much all that costs.
It's really interesting because the government itself has a pretty aggressive digital policy internally when you're dealing with them.
Yep.
But when they deal with us, the opposite's not true because they don't think a thought about, for example, Ruling 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, which just added 2 to 4 pages to every EOB that ever goes out now in the future. Did they ever think about the social impact of
Probably not.
when they pass that ruling? They should. Be held accountable.
And in order to do business with certain government entities, you have to be paperless. That's the funny part.
These expenses are unbudgeted spending, right? So and it's hard to discuss because we don't know until you ask. And so, for example, I've gone after this number, Skip, which is why I'm talking about it, is that it's a salary play. How many people are in your compliance division that do this? And then divided over your document volume and any fines or things that they've had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a crazy cost because when you do make a mistake and you start looking at, somebody was talking about root cause analysis of stuff, that never gets included. These guys had to spend 5 hours trying to clean up something. It just looks like, oh, we had to reprint it, we had to have some postage, we had to do PR calls or something like that. But this is huge.
Yeah, I don't expect to get down to the minutia. Adding the 2 pages, that's a cost.
It is.
The impact on postage, that's a cost.
Yeah, it could take you from a flat,
But-
6 by 9 to a flat.
But we don't know. It's ever changing. I kind of listed some of them down here, and then I ran out of room. And it's gone beyond just healthcare and finance. Everybody's being impacted by compliance. Not, Paul, to your point, the consumer isn't being, participating in that directly, but they're impacted by it one way or another.
Even our customers are impacted when they don't even see it. What I mean by that is, I may, if Blue Cross is a client of mine, they may have a regulator that wants to come on Tuesday to do a regulation check. Great, no problem. I will tell you that at least once a week, minimum, not be Blue Cross Blue Shield specific, but it is city, Morgan Stanley. It's a ISO one, it's an SSA 16, it's a PCI, whatever it is. My team is being audited. I now have to, as a vendor partner, I have to carry an entire audit team, an entire compliance team that is geared towards making your client experience as my customer go well. We want your auditor to get in here, see what they need to see, and get out. Because you want that, because you don't want them to find anything incorrect. And so we have to make sure that we're an extension of our customers to have that audit go well. So now we have an expense on our books, and you know where that goes. Our expenses go to our customers, whether you like it or not. It's part of the fee. So it makes everything go up.
Yeah. Now, in terms of irrelevance, there's a lot associated with irrelevance. Your loss of credibility, loss of customers. I'll give you a couple examples. When I was in my early 50s, I got a letter from the U.S. Army to be all that I could be. Well, I don't know what the upper age limit is, but I think it's 45, and I was well past that. And there's no reason the U.S. government shouldn't know that I had bypassed that 45. Now, was I in shape and all that? Yeah, I understand. But, but I was beyond, I was an ineligible prospect, and they actually have enough information on me even back then, because I have a social security number, I have pay taxes, I do all. They weren't talking to each other, evidently. Another one I got, and I won't mention the bank, but it's not Bank of America, I will tell you that. I get an offer from my mortgage company that says, we can give you, I don't know, it's 4.5 or 5.5% mortgage and an equity line, and you can buy, and they had a picture of a boat and all that stuff, and you can buy it. Well, here's the problem. My interest rate's 2.75%. Why wouldn't they know that? Loss of credibility. I didn't, dump them because refinancing is such a pain, but I certainly am not going to run out. Huh? Well, and I got a great interest rate. Yeah. And I'm not going to run out and say, you need to go to these guys. So, and then you have increased support costs. Now, all this costs money. Being irrelevant costs money. You're sending something out for no reason, or that's not relevant to people. And it increases your acquisition costs. If somebody sent me a direct mail piece for a Rolls Royce, they just wasted their money. Because I can't afford a Rolls Royce. And I'm okay with that. But, with this big data and all that things that are going on, and the way CCM is, that doesn't happen if it's done properly anymore. So, some stats on irrelevance. 91% of all consumers report that they opt out or unsubscribe to emails at some point. Now, that could be after the second email. That could be 5 years later, but they're going to opt out. 63% of consumers stated they would consider ending a brand relationship because of irrelevance. 63% is a lot of percent. CMO Council, 73% of consumers still receive promotions for products they've already purchased. How many, yeah. I won't name my telephone company, but, I just signed up for a plan. I signed an agreement. Then they come back with a better agreement and a better plan. And I'm sitting here going, a week later, yeah, and then you call them up and go, oh, there's a limitation on that. So now this is by Sandra, I don't know if you know Sandra Zarati or Lee Gallagher. They were with IBM and Ricoh for a long time. But this is, you have to read it twice. Each relevance hurdle creates a higher relevance hurdle for all subsequent messages. Because every time you get an irrelevant message, then it creates a higher intolerance as you continue to get more irrelevant messages. Okay, so There is a starting point, as I mentioned earlier, to a CCM strategy, but there's really never an end. Technology, human behavior, and all that is going to continue to evolve, and your CCM strategy is going to have to continue to evolve. So I'll take you on a little journey in terms of how this has changed and show you kind of where we're going to go in the future. Jerry Lazarus mentioned the Xerox 9700, which was introduced in 1977, 78. So back then, when things were going out, if you were getting direct mail, it was, "Dear occupant." You know, you couldn't personalize back then. But statements kind of look like this. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, you could build a table with a DJD, and yeah. Anyway, that's what the old credit card statements look like. So they were dealing with commercial transactions. They were based on, black and white printing. They overprinted offset shelves, so you got your shelves or pre-printed forms from your printer, and then you printed over it, and then you had to make sure you lined it up. Most of it was mainframe-based legacy type applications with the bus and tag tables running underneath the computer floor. And then we got to this, where we got a little bit of color. Well, that in part is thanks to the Xerox 9700, which, as I mentioned, was in 1977. Cut sheet printer, 120 duplex images a minute, fast. You could create electronic forms overlays that perfectly aligned, because you were creating the data, creating it around the data. You could get 16 fonts per page. And then they went to 32, then 64, then 128, and people put that many fonts on the page and created some of the ugliest documents in the history of the world. Now this is the 9700. This is me with brown hair. It really is. So anyway, that's where it all started. And that's when you started getting "Dear Skip," and then you had your name interjected into the body of your letter, and they always put your name. Well, is that good news, Skip? But they always put it at the end because there wasn't text wrapping and they didn't know how long your name was going to be. That's the truth. It really is. So then we came up with digital printers, which now allow multiple fonts on a page. You can insert graphics, charts. This is where technology is now, both in toner-based systems and inkjet. Now, how's that impact all of CCM? We've got all these tools now, these print tools, in order to create customized customer messaging. But this is, the Bible, the Wikipedia. But according to Wikipedia, customer communications management is a term highlighted by research groups such as Gardner Group, Forrester Research, InfoTrends, and Madison Advisors to define a convergent set of information technology solutions that together provide organizations with the ability to advance the way they communicate with their customers. I wanted to play like the Star Spangled Banner while you were reading that. It sounded so noble. But the common denominator is better communications with your customer. Everybody wants to communicate better with your customer. So, what is CRM? Somebody mentioned it earlier. It's the right message to the right person at the right time, and now using the right media. So let me go a little bit more. I think I got time. So let's talk about CCM a little bit. As I mentioned, it could be fairly simple. You got to start somewhere, and it can get complex. But there are key components to any type of CCM strategy. First of all, data. I don't know if anybody believes or remembers garbage in, garbage out. GIGO. If your data stinks, it's ineffective. So your data's got to be good. Now, you have to be able to integrate this data. I mean, when I was at, I'll mention it, there's nobody from Kodak here, right? So, when I was with Kodak, one of the frustrating things for me is I ran the sales organization, but then you had the service organization, then you had the professional services organization. All three of these people were working out of three different, databases. So when this person did a service contract and I'm trying to sell over here, there's kind of a disjoint. So it's important that you have data integration. Segmentation analysis is also part of CCM. I won't go through all this, but customer communications, you want structured, on-demand, interactive type documents. A lot of these new documents now, I don't know how many people have seen AR documents. In fact, I know the folks at Solomar are working with Trek to actually do augmented reality statements. So you take your phone and go like this, and the graph jumps out of the page, and you can. I don't know if that's what you're doing with the graph, but it's very cool. So interactive. It's certainly not limited to print. Personalized videos. Pitney Bowes actually spoke at our conference last year. They've got a great, if you haven't gone out and looked at the demo, on the, it's great. I actually asked them to speak because I saw the video on Google. I Googled it and it came up, and I had fun with that thing. If you ever get an opportunity, it'll change parameters for you. It's really cool. QR codes. Now, I just read an article the other day that QR codes are back. They're back. I thought they were gone, which really distressed me because I have one on the back of my business card. And I'm not done. I don't want to buy new business cards yet. So, anyway, QR codes. They were overused. You walk down or drive down the freeway, and there's a what do they call the big boards? A billboard with a QR code. So anyway, there's still applications out there for it. And then we talked about multi-channel. Multi-channel, more than one channel, omni-channel. And that, by the way, that GMC, if you really want to know the difference between that and cross-channel and everything else, the GMC white paper, go to the GMC website, download it. It's eight pages, something like that. It's a good read, and you'll walk away really understanding the differences between multi-channel, omni-channel, and cross-channel. So, and you want to optimize your content. We put out stuff that is irrelevant sometimes. Then, of course, you got archiving, retrieval. And then back over here, which I think is one of the most important aspects of CCM, is you got to listen to people. If people are giving you input and they're giving you feedback, there's nothing worse than somebody responding to you and you're not paying any attention to them. So people say, what's the value proposition? Well, it would seem that it would be obvious, but if you implement a good CCM strategy, you're looking at a higher ROI. There's more transparency within your organization because these silos are now talking together, and the CIOs and CTOs and all these people are now coming together and optimizing your communications. Cost, centralized information, standardizing, limiting your compliance, and all of that liability is huge. And then from the customer's view, it's more effective dialogue. And you're sending it to them via their preferred channels. Although I want to make a quote here right now, mail's making a comeback. Those little millennial kids, or how many, what's Caroline, she's 14? What would she be considered? A millennial. They're going to get excited about going to the mailbox again. Yes. It's on film, so you'll know. Huh?
The mailbox like Santa Claus or something.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that. Okay. You have a positive message, and you have more satisfied customers. From an information technology standpoint, a lot of the things that Jerry talked about in terms of, risk and processes and everything else, when, you centralize stuff, it's more efficient from a risk management system. And it's easier to manage the data security, disaster recovery, all of that type of thing. And for people that provide services like Broadridge and other companies, there's new sources of revenue out there. You're not just printing, you're doing a lot of other services. Of course, you're taking on a lot of expense too, because you got to support all those services. So, and they can provide data management, analytics, and so on. So, as I see the future, we're continuing to shift from customer experience, now the new word, customer engagement. So, it is about the experience, but it's also about how you're engaging your customer. In an ideal situation, if you could develop a two-way virtual communication with your customer, where you're providing them the information they want, they're responding whatever channel they want, and then you're putting it back out in the channel that they want and all that, that would be a very good situation, but it's very, very tough to get to. You're instilling trust and brand loyalty, and above all, you're optimizing the technical advancements that are going on. And you got to respond to changes in your customers' requirements. Somebody says, how do I know what channel I should communicate with my customer with? So have you tried asking them? Yeah. Have you sent something out and said, do you want this via, and I know they want print and, digital, but do they want digital on their text messages? Do they want all of them? Do they want them quarterly? Or do they want you to hold them up and say, hey, just come over here and get them when you need them? Ask them. And a lot of companies don't ask. This kind of takes you up the conventional print and to digital, and then single to multi-channel. That's kind of where most of the companies are. And then as you go up, you're talking about the omni, which is actually multi-channel synchronicity or whatever it is, where departments are talking together, they're putting together a unified message, they're sending that out via a number of channels. You go into a centralized communication hub, which requires pretty much a center of excellence, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then you get to the customer engagement strategy, where you're actually communicating back and forth with those customers and provide them the information and the interchange that they're looking for. So in order to do this, you got to manage your CCM information centrally. You have to include mobile technology. Anybody that isn't doing mobile technology on a big basis is making a mistake. And you've got to enable your business users to help reduce IT costs, push some of it back on your customers and your users. Need to automate and integrate in the future if you're not doing it now. And you have to understand there's an evolving engagement strategy. And you have to at some point commit to a center of excellence, which is a centralized operation that people are agreeing on the content. You're bringing the stakeholders together and talking about content. It's a facility for sharing best practices, to talk about the things you should be doing, how you're doing, what your messaging is going to be, what's the personality of your organization going to be. And it's the keeper of all the digital content. A lot of problems within companies are there's silos within companies of content. Marketing is doing one thing, product marketing is doing something else, engineering, well, they usually send it to product marketing and so on, but there's a lot of different silos of content, and you need to bring it all together. This is like one of my favorite quotes. Customers don't know what they want until we tell them. I mean, think about the iPhone. would you have any idea, if you've never seen an iPhone, that you wanted an iPhone? You couldn't conceive it. The app for Chick-fil-A, I couldn't have conceived, curbside pickup, because nobody does curbside pickup. So as you're putting together your CCM strategy, what you've got to do is anticipate what you think the needs or wants of your customer are going to be, which goes back to that center of excellence where you're talking and pulling ideas together about it. No matter where you're at, assess where you're at. Okay, I got 5 minutes. I'm good. Assess where you're at. Do some research. Even if you're down this CCM path, stay on top of where this industry's going. Do research. Attend conferences. We happen to have one in March, just to let you know. Get a commitment internal to keep it going or to start it. Work with vendors. There are a tremendous amount value of resources, the vendor community. Create the ROI and walk before you run. But start but don't stop, and you're never going to end. Now, what I'd like to do is, I want to close with a story. I live in Florida, and I have a pool, and everybody that has a pool has one of these little cages around it. For a variety of reasons. Huh?
Keep the critters out.
They have one of these cages. Okay, so it keeps the leaves out of the tree, out of the pool. It keeps the kids from the neighborhood coming in, and it keeps alligators out of your pool. I live on the back end of a lake, so we have alligators occasionally walk between the house. So I needed a new screen because I had some of my screens were, ripping and that type of thing. So I told my wife, I said, well, we got to look for a screen guy because I'd never had my screens replaced at this house. So about a week later, I go out to the mailbox and open the mailbox, and there's a postcard that says, Screens by Fred. It's honest God truth. Screens by Fred. 15% discount if you have your pool rescreened in the next 60 days. I take it in, set it down. I start, looking at other screen, Googled Fred, got reviews. Fred was a good guy, he was, everything, good prices, good value, everything else. So I call Fred up. Fred goes, well, geez, I can't make it out there for 3 weeks. I said, okay, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. Well, in Florida, when somebody says they're not going to be there in 3 weeks, they might not ever come. No, it's the worst. So anyway, 3 weeks, 10 o'clock in the morning, Fred shows up. I look out like this, look for the crew. There's no crew. It's Fred. Fred's got his truck. He's got a big long rolls of screening and everything. Fred comes into my lanai, rips down all the old screens, starts putting them up. Gets to be lunchtime, and it's hot. It's like the middle of the summer. I decide to get my screens done. So I go up to Fred. I said, Fred, you want some water? He goes, no, I brought my thermos. I'm good. I said, I can't bkind that you sent me a deal on screening, and I needed my screen done. And guy's kind of a, he's kind of a growth, and obviously what he does, he wasn't wearing a suit and tie for sure. But he looks at me and goes, well, Mr. Henk, I got to tell you, it's really not rocket science. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, screens in Florida last about 7 or 8 years. All the houses in this neighborhood are 8 years old, and 8 years and 2 months. He says, all I do is I go down to the county, the building, and I find out when your house was built, and I send you a postcard. And I got mine done. The guy 2 doors down got his done, and the guy next to him got his done. You're talking about $8,000 worth of work for a postcard with the guy with a CCM strategy of knowing that just those screens last 8 years. So what did he do? He sent me the right message. He gave me my 15% discount. He sent it to me. Actually, he should have probably sent it to my wife, but he sent it to me, who was the right person. He certainly sent it at the right time because he knew it was the right time. And he sent the right media because it was a postcard. It said 15% right on it, and I called. So my point is, you don't have to have complicated CCM strategies. You just have to have a strategy. So thank you. I'm done.